Pending bills are literally everywhere in all ministries. And this is a concern that was raised by members of parliament and with members of the committee. And we have clearly said that Treasury should have a proper roadmap on how to address the pending bills, because pending bills are piling up every other day. And it is unfortunate because there are people now, the traders don't feel very safe when they are also trading with ministries. So ministries should also be accountable on that. Honorable Speaker, there are also many court awards given against the different ministries, and they are piling up every other day. There should be a way of addressing this. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there is failure to prioritize completion of projects. Mr. Speaker, the committee notes that there are projects which have become a permanent feature in the budget, such as the Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, KIRDI, in South B, the Mitihani House, which is older than some of the members here because it is over 40 years old. Mr. Speaker, the Ronald Gara Utalii College, among other institutions, not to mention our own building around here. Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury must provide funds and complete these projects within the next 6 months. So it means the next supplementary and also the next financial year. In addition, the specialized project management unit based at the National Treasury, to the view of members of the committee, should be disbanded because they are not doing their work. Honorable Speaker, we also noticed cuts in counterpart funding. Mr. Speaker, this committee is concerned that the expenditure cuts have also adversely affected counterpart funding, contrary to the guidelines of the preparations of supplementary estimates issued to MDS. Mr. Speaker, we also noticed that there was inadequate consultation during the supplementary budget. Mr. Speaker, given these emerging issues and other observations raised by the departmental committees, are very minimal consultations between the National Treasury and the ministries. Departments and agencies during the supplementary process came to our committee and they were given contradicting information from what the National Treasury was also giving us. So going forward, we seek that the National Treasury to have adequate consultation with the MDS. Honorable Speaker, on the policies recommendation, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, Honorable Speaker, having considered the above matters, the committee has made the following policy recommendations. 1, that within the next 6 months, the National Treasury should provide funds and a clear roadmap for the completion of all stalled projects and present this information to National Assembly. 2, that during the finalization of the budget estimates of 2021-2022, the National Treasury should set aside funds for the settlement of all pending bills and court awards. Mr. Speaker, we are informed that pending bills have gone in excess of 100 billion shillings. The court awards are also in excess of 100 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, that's a disaster in waiting. Honorable Speaker, number 3, that to avert incomplete projects, the National Treasury should request the Auditor General to carry out an audit on ongoing projects that have been affected by the budget cuts by April 2021, with a view of funding these projects in the financial year 2021-2022, or if there is a supplementary 2 coming, it should also be factored. 4, that upon approval of the supplementary budget 1, the MDS and the National Treasury should revise their output and performance target to realign with the increase or decrease in budgetary allocation for various programs. 5, that the new projects in the supplementary budget 1 for the financial year 2020-2021 should be deferred to the financial year 2022-2023. And finally, that the next supplementary budget, the National Treasury should ensure adequate consultation with the MDS before supplementary changes are effected on the budget. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the financial recommendation. Having considered the above matters, The committee recommends that this House resolves to approve 1. The supplementary estimate number 1 of financial year 2020-2021 is 21. Honorable Speaker, I beg to submit, and as I call upon my good friend, the whip, majority whip, to second, just to clarify and reinstate to members that the CDF funds to second. Yeah, the CDF funds have been factored and they are in this. And I call upon Honorable Wangwe to second.
Honorable Wangwe. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second this supplementary estimate 1. And Honorable Speaker, on the onset, allow me to inform the House that the supplementary estimate 1 is brought before this House, Honorable Speaker, on the basis of reduction in revenue occasioned by the issues around COVID-19, all of which we know, the circumstances that, Honorable Speaker, we cannot rule out. Honorable Speaker, based on the issues that we have around, there is the issue that reflects in the supplementary 1 to do with salary cuts. Most of the public servants, Honorable Speaker, do expect that there will be salary cuts, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, in the first supplementary which came to before this House, before the addendum, the reflection of those salary cuts was there. But I wish to request my colleagues that when you are reading the supplementary document we have on the floor, please also refer to the addendum that came after the first one was received in the House. Honorable Speaker, there is also the issue which I would want maybe the House to be aware, the adherence to the physical framework, Honorable Speaker. This supplementary estimate 1 is brought before this House with strict adherence, such that all the cuts, Honorable Speaker, that may be reflecting in various state departments is strictly within a figure that has been tied and accepted to the GDP, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, it is a clean document, it is very clear, and Honorable Speaker, it can be understood that it has not deviated in any way from the figures that were determined of 8.7 to the GDP, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wish also to clarify that various projects that had been begun by the government, Honorable Speaker, have not been reduced in terms of being capped to proceed. Honorable Speaker, most of the members will expect that since the supplementary estimate has reduced the figures, so the projects are going to stall. Honorable Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of the House that various programs of the government are ongoing, especially the programs in roads like Expressway, the programs in health, UHC, the programs in interior, the programs in agriculture, the programs in trade, and the programs in foreign emissions, Honorable Speaker. The government is all making sure that they are all moving forward. However much the supplementary is cutting the overall budget, Honorable Speaker, but the programs of the government are moving forward, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, what should also be noted in this supplementary estimate is there are very many widening pending bills. Honorable Speaker, when the Committee on JLAC was presented by the Solicitor General, he gave us an absolute figure that the overall claims occasioned by the court judgments to government is amounting to 150 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. That is something which this House should desist of the matter and find out that, Honorable Speaker, the government must address in the future estimates to this House, so that Kenyans who are owed money, where the courts arrest themselves, should be paid their money, Honorable Speaker. Rather than you go to court, you spend 10 years, you get an award, and again to get your money from the Attorney General or Solicitor General, it becomes a problem. Honorable Speaker, what's also noted in this supplementary estimates is the ballooning in incomplete projects. Honorable Speaker, there are projects, the way the chair budget has alluded to, that began about 38 years ago. There are projects which are 10 years ago, which are 10 years old. We would want, Honorable Speaker, since these projects are now reflecting at the moment, let the Auditor General give us their values, their present estimates, and evaluate all of them so that we can be able, Honorable Speaker, to know how much do they cost and what was the initial cost. For example, Honorable Speaker, there is a project whose initial cost was 3 billion, but now when you look at the final demand note from the departmental committee at the moment, is costing about 7 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, that enlargement is what we would want to avoid. Honorable Speaker, finally, we take cognizance of equalization fund, which in this supplementary budget, Honorable Speaker, the fund has existed. Money was deposited into the fund for several years, but the money has not been dispersed for the purpose for which it was intended. That means, Honorable Speaker, that money has been lying idle, yet constituents, yet various counties require and voters and Kenyans need the money to be used for the purpose it was voted for. Therefore, with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second.
Honourable members, I propose the question that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the first supplementary estimates for the financial year 2020/2021, laid on the tip of the House on Thursday, March 18, 2021, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 223 of the Constitution and Standing Order 243, 1. Approves an increment of the total recurrent expenditure for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 19 billion 125 million 524,385 in respect of the votes as contained in the attached schedule. 2. Approves an increment of the total capital expenditure for the financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 61 billion 579 million 711,818 in respect to the votes as contained in the attached schedule. 3. Approves an overall increment in the total budget for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 80 billion 705 million 236,203 in respect to the votes as contained in the schedule. And 4, resolves that the attached schedule forms the basis for the introduction of the first Supplementary Appropriations Act 2020/2021. Honourable members, before I open debate, I have received a proposed amendment by the Honourable Adan Keinan, member for Eldas, Commissioner of the Parliamentary Service Commission, and the Chair of the Finance Committee of the Commission. So, Honourable Keinan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move an amendment to the first supplementary estimates for the financial year 2020/2021 with a lot of reluctance, Mr. Speaker, because ideally where we are, I ought not to be moving this. But Mr. Speaker, I want members to hear this clearly and loudly. Parliament, being one of the three arms of government, must deal with its own issues first. There are a number of unforeseen issues that came up this year. You are aware one of them was the issue of the advisory note that we got from Maraga. It was not budgeted for. The High Court decision that nullified High Court decisions actually that also nullified your domestic whatever was not budgeted for. Mr. Speaker, I say reluctantly because this is one institution, being one of the three arms of government. We are aware right now we are going through a very difficult period because of the COVID crisis. We are also aware because of the cash crunch and the economic crisis. Parliament, being one of the three arms of government, operates within those realities. But Mr. Speaker, equally, this being one of the three key arms of government,
you could move
yes,
read the amendments as proposed
yes,
in the order paper, then explain to members.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that I beg that the following amendments be effected on the schedule as contained in the order paper. A, vote 2041. The details are given in the paper. B, vote 2042 on the National Assembly. C, vote 2043 on the Parliamentary Service Commission. And as Speaker, as a rider, we say, I'm saying this because the consequential adjustment being made here to the subtotals and totals in the respective schedules be effected to the amendments. But I think I'll just give a brief history of this. We are aware right now because of the challenges and Parliament being one of the three arms of government, there are unique issues that really affect each of the three arms of government. And Parliament being the institution that it is, you know all the challenges that we are going through right now. Some of the things were not foreseen. Nobody ever anticipated that Maraga was going to issue that uncalled for actually advisory note. Parliamentary Service Commission must protect members of Parliament, and you know what that particular advisory note means. Equally, a moribund group went to court and attempted to nullify all the bills that you have passed, again, which went through. There must be a budget. Somebody else again went to court through again another busybody to nullify some of the basic things that you get. Again, it went through. Parliamentary service must be prepared to defend. But equally, Mr. Speaker, the chairman of the budget committee has alluded to incomplete projects, Mr. Speaker. And I know one of them, having been the former chair of Public Investment Committee, the Mutihani House. Mutihani House, you are, Mr. Speaker, you are also the chairman of Public Investment Committee at one stage. And right now we have the chair and other members here. We do not want this particular building here, Mr. Speaker, to join that league, that classification. And our desire as a commission, and I will say this openly, frankly, without fear. Our desire as a commission, the building is being managed by Minister of Public Works. Our desire is for us to complete that building by August. Every year, the taxpayers are spending close to 600 million on rents, jeopardizing your security, jeopardizing your comfort, because you ought to stay in a comfortable place. Therefore, removing the budgetary allocation for this particular building, meaning we are only exacerbating the challenges that we are going through. And therefore, so what we are asking you to do, right now, we are not asking for additional funds. PAC is not asking for additional funds. PAC is just asking for restatement of your budget, all the items covered in your budget for 2020-2021, period. And this is not a very difficult thing, and therefore I do not want to go into the details because I've given other subjects. Please, we know there are challenges. If this amendment is not passed, I will tell you this: the operations of Parliament will come completely to a halt. Yes, and you will not blame anybody because Parliament must function, notwithstanding the challenges. This is the mother, this is the epicenter of our governance structure. And therefore my appeal to you is pass this, and I want to thank the Speaker for approving this. Maybe during when we'll be preparing the nitty-gritty on the supplementary appropriation bill, that is the time when we'll talk about the details. But for now, I want to appeal to you to support. To second this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second what my colleague has just raised. Mr. Speaker, the Commission is mandated to take care of the welfare of the members of this House and also our staff. And indeed, we recommend that these amendments be adopted, Mr. Speaker, so that the activities and the welfare, most of the activities in this House doesn't come to a naught. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish to second and recommend that the amendments be adopted. Thank you.
Honour members, let's just do one business at a time. I did give you an indication that the Honourable Kenan was to move an amendment which he has. It has been seconded. So I have to propose the question that the following amendments be effected on the schedule as contained in the order paper. A, vote 2041, which is the Parliamentary Service Commission. B, vote 2042, the National Assembly. C, vote 2043, Parliamentary Joint Services. And that the consequential adjustments be made to the subtotals and totals in respect of schedules to effect the amendments. Is that the answer? I put the question. Well, I put the question, which is that amendments be effected on the schedule as contained in the order paper. A, for 2041, Parliamentary Service Commission. B, for 2042, the National Assembly. C, for 2043, the Parliamentary Joint Services. And that the consequential adjustments be made as appears on the order paper, and that the consequential adjustments be made to the subtotals and totals in the respective schedules to effect the amendments. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as court opinion say nay? The ayes have it. That means it. The Honourable Duale, the Honourable Duale.
No, Mr. Speaker, this is being very unfair. Some of us, we took time to research, to come and contribute to this motion. So, Mr. Speaker, as I supported this supplementary estimate number 1 for the financial year 2020-2021, which is proposing a 4.3% increase in the approved budget that we did in this House of 2020-2021 by a whooping 125.6 in the form of recurrent. Development vote of 59.8 billion and 3.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, the consolidated service expenditure has increased by about 45.6 billion. And Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, in bringing this supplementary budget, have raised a number of reasons. What precipitated the National Treasury to bring this budget? One of them, they say, is on COVID-19. 2, they are saying they want to pay pending bills. 3 is because of salary adjustment. 4, there are changes which they have made in as far as projects related to development partners. And number 5, the reason they are giving is the rationalization of the budget, among many other challenges. The Speaker, the gainers in this supplementary, for the House will see, is Teacher Service Commission, 7.9 billion, for personal enrollment, the agriculture sector, crop department, 12.9 billion, specifically for maize subsidies. So we expect that once the House approves this and do the appropriation, supplementary appropriation, 12.2 billion, 12.9 billion, Department of Defense is getting 6.6 billion, while the National Intelligence Service is getting 6.5. Who are the losers? The tourism department, 2.5. The national treasury itself, 4.6. Department of Wildlife. So this is what's going to happen. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee. For the first time, there were about 4 subsequent years where there was arrears in CDF. Arrears in CDF. And I want to thank this committee and the chair that item has come to an end by the passage of this supplementary of 13.6 billion. It will close, and we expect the minister, once the president signs the supplementary appropriation bill, that amount of money is closed. Mr. Speaker, I really want us to do 2 things. Finally, as I finish, we must amend Section 44 of the PFM Act, not to allow the National Treasury to bring supplementary as we approach close to the end of the financial year. So we must bring an amendment, and our members to support us, that we amend Section 44 of the PFM Act, that 2 months to the end of financial year, no supplementary can come. Mr. Speaker, there is total 0 reduction on equalization fund, on pension. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at that, you'll see a number of projects funded by development partners has been completely left with no money. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury must do what is called impact analysis. When you reduce a state department or an agency money, you cut their money, you must assess the impact it will have on those projects. Projects will stall. You don't just sit. So the National Treasury, Mr. Speaker, must do that. Mr. Speaker, finally, we must amend the Parliamentary Service Commission Act. We must give more powers to the Parliamentary Budget Office to do audit work, to have more legislative powers in order to make sure that this House does not lose the powers of budget-making process. The Budget Parliamentary Office is a technical arm, and I want to thank the men and women led by the director and the clerk for doing good service. Finally, Mr. Speaker, committees, where they submit their report to the Budget Committee, their input must be considered. If they are not going to be considered, there is no need of referring the estimate to the departmental committee. You can as well send it to the Budget Committee.
Member for Uriri. Member is not there.
I'm here, Mr. Speaker.
No, you can't be. You put your hand and then
you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion on the first supplementary for this financial year. Mr. Speaker, we noticed while we were deliberating on this supplementary, whereas Treasury continues to say that there's a drop in revenue collection, and that we are operating during difficult times, and the issue of pending bills. The truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that it is not as much reflected in this supplementary as they purport, because you see this supplementary is actually increasing the spend by a further almost 150 billion. Mr. Speaker, we also did notice that there continues to be a breach in the use of Article 223, whereby Treasury spends money and then comes and seeks parliamentary approval. And I just wanted to urge my colleagues in the departmental committees to be a bit more keen on their expenditures that are done under Article 223, so that they interrogate the committees, the aligned ministries, a bit more on this. Mr. Speaker, every single supplementary, we continue to see an attempt by Treasury to cut CDF. And I want to thank the members of this House for showing Treasury that CDF is a no-go zone. Every single supplementary, they have always cut it, and they almost want to use it as a negotiating tool for all the other things that they want to put in the supplementary budget. And we do hope that this is going to be the last thing. One of the shocking things that we also did notice, Mr. Speaker, is that there was cut on salaries, meaning that the process of preparing supplementary budgets doesn't seem to have some science behind it, that it is just an arbitrary cut on an Excel sheet, top to bottom. That's why we keep on getting amendments going forward, and we have told Treasury as much. Mr. Speaker, we continue to fund state-owned enterprises. One particular one is a poster. Poster, up to this financial year, has actually been funding itself. But in this supplementary, we have actually regularized about 810 million that they have. But when we look further, Mr. Speaker, we find that poster is still owed about 1.7 billion by the Ministry of Interior. So government owing another government agency money, and that government agency almost going into receivership, actually almost closing shop, and we continue to fund it from taxpayers. So we are urging Treasury that in the main estimates, they should be able to deduct that equivalent amount of money so that we give it to the other state-owned enterprises so that we don't continue to fund it from the exchequer. Mr. Speaker, I want to also report that the Budget Committee did a very good job, despite pressures from Treasury, to reverse amendments that had come from departmental committees, that we tried as much as we could, and almost about 98% of recommendations that came from departmental committees are actually held in this particular budget. During one of those sessions, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to report, and it's important that we go on record, that this parliament is a budget-making parliament. Treasury's role is only to give us estimates. There's always been a consistent thought from Treasury that we will only rubber stamp the things that they do from that other side. In fact, in one of the submissions from Treasury, they alluded that the departmental committees in consultations with the line ministries were consulting people who are not representing the views of government, which was a very dangerous statement. And we want to say, and I want to urge members of departmental committees that please put in your foot down, interrogate, and feel free to make any amendments, because this house is the house that makes amendments. Mr. Speaker, finally, I also want to say, to just add my voice to what the chair has said, that many members in the morning did not understand what we were talking about. But now it is becoming very clear that we have taken care of the members' interests and ensured that not only the 10 billion that was deducted for CDF that we have reverted in this supplementary, but we have even also taken care of the rest. So that the next steps we should now ensure is a disbursement of that full amount. And then now we just become vigilant in the next session. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Leader Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this the report and indeed the passage of the motion, and wish to thank the committee for having sat over very tense moments. Budgeting is always at push and pull. Lots of amendments coming from committees, coming from Treasury, and I know that, Honorable Speaker, that even as we look at this, it will be good that we know there was the original amendments, then there was our first addendum, then there was another addendum, then there were some committee changes, and even as we finalize this, with my keen audit eye, I know there's a possibility that we could actually be moving money from an account, from a vote that perhaps has already been exhausted. So I would like to just ask that even as between now and the appropriation, the committee and Treasury go through this with a fine-tooth comb, so that we don't approve something in vain to just be moving some money from one vote to another when that vote has been exhausted. I know, for example, there are actually some votes within the Ministry of Water that projects have been completed, but we may have scheduled them for moving monies. And those are some of the things that we just want to call for that rationalization between now and the time we actually get to the appropriation. The other thing is obviously to thank members for for their dedication this afternoon, and I appreciate. And I just want to report also, Honorable Speaker, that members did ask for a firm commitment by the Treasury in terms of the disbursement schedule. I want to report here that the CS for Treasury has written to the clerk, and I have a copy of that letter, showing putting in writing what I actually said today in terms of the disbursement program on how the whole money will be disbursed. So we have it in writing by communication from Treasury to the clerk of the National Assembly, and I think that should put that matter to rest. We shall hold him now to account based on that commitment that he has put. So I think we are making good progress, and I want to thank members for raising the issue. And now that we have secured, we can make progress and move forward. With those few remarks, I beg to support.
Member for Funyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand also to support the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on its consideration of the Supplementary Budget 1. Honorable Speaker, it's worthwhile to note that before the amendments we have done moved by the Parliamentary Service Commission, there was going to be an increase of close to 80 billion on the budget that was approved in this just about to be concluded financial year, amounting to 4.3% increase. Honorable Speaker, of course, the most worrying thing all along is that the revenue collections have continued to reduce, yet we have continued to increase expenditure on the other hand, which actually does not make a lot of sense, but the reasons given by Treasury for the increase in the budget seems plausible in some instances, in others do not really make a lot of sense. However, the question of worry, Honorable Speaker, is the increase of the deficit from 7.5, probably now it could go beyond 9%. Honorable Speaker, that means that the deficit has to be financed by borrowing, either from the local market or more expensive avenues like the sovereign bond and the rest of the things. Honorable Speaker, our appetite for debt is starting to alarm every person in this country, and it might be necessary for us as a Parliament, as the National Assembly, to have a critical look at the various debt management strategies that are being presented to this House. Honorable Speaker, it's also worrying that the increase seems to be directed towards non-productive sectors. The productive sectors like tourism, trade, industry have been stripped most of their resources in terms of development funding, and in some cases, before the second schedule was brought, they had actually cut personal emolument, and knowing that most of these two sectors are labor intensive and require proper funding for purposes of running the various programs. This is what we are called, Honorable Speaker, a warped priorities, wrong priorities in terms of managing the economy of this country. At this rate, Honorable Speaker, we are not going to grow this economy. We are going to continuously shrink this economy because you can't keep on investing in unproductive sectors, and where you sit, you think we are going to expand this economy. Honorable Speaker, we are seriously have wrong priorities that are not going to take us anywhere, Honorable Speaker. Another worrying issue, Honorable Speaker, is the ever-increasing pending bill. As we stand today, it's reported 150 billion amounts to pending bills. Honorable Speaker, most of these pending bills are all to medium and small enterprises. The economic hardship we are subjecting to these people is untold. Whenever you open many newspapers nowadays, about 3 to 4 pages are all about auction of private and personal properties that were given as lien for purpose of getting some financing facilities. Honorable Speaker, unless we come down and seriously think, we are not going to grow this economy, we are continuously going to shrink this economy. Honorable Speaker, the issue of illegality. The report has highlighted various areas of illegality. It is untenable and it's inconceivable that the Budget and Appropriation Committee has let the Treasury off the hook in these glaring illegalities. Honorable Speaker, new items are not permitted to be introduced in the supplementary budget. This is contrary to Regulation 48 of the PFM regulations. Honorable Speaker, many programs have increased beyond the 10%. Honorable Speaker, that again is contrary to the law. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the various cuts in various programs are going to create a crisis of ballooning stalled projects. For example, Honorable Speaker, cutting the State Department for Cooperative Development budget by a whopping 200 million, you are seriously incapacitating the department. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I hope in the next supplementary budget, this issue should be considered for review. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Dagoretti South. I've given you that, but you started also pressing. I've already given you, but you are pressed again. Can you move in front? Maybe there's...
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And even as I rise to contribute on this motion, Mr. Speaker, of the supplementary budget, I'd like to note, Mr. Speaker, that overall there should be a concern in this country, Mr. Speaker, about how we are budgeting for our economy, Mr. Speaker. The very best, Speaker, whether it is for family, whether it is for a company, or even for a country, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we are living within our means, Mr. Speaker. We realize that this year we shall be drawing a budget of close to 3 trillion Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker, whereas we are very clear in our mind that even if we put the effort that is required, we might not be able to raise even 1.2 trillion shillings, Mr. Speaker. However, because of the time that I have, Mr. Speaker, I shall try to apply myself to issues that affect the people of Dagoretti South, Mr. Speaker. In moving this motion, the chairman of the budget committee did provide a schedule. And in this schedule, he was showing us how the monies are being spread out, Mr. Speaker. And on this schedule, there is a vote code 1011, which is the executive office of the president, Mr. Speaker. And under it, there is a vote line, there is a budget line by the name Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize that in Nairobi, unlike other counties where the governors are in place, in Nairobi we have a situation where we have the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker. And there are many questions that Nairobians are asking, Mr. Speaker. As we know, Article 10 of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, requires that we abide to the tenets of the rule of law, democracy, the participation of the people, human dignity, and other principles, Mr. Speaker. However, with the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, we do not even understand where we stand as a county, because the legality of how this entity came to being is a question on its own. However, when it comes to money matters, Mr. Speaker, there are quite a number of questions that we raise as Nairobians. One, we would like to know, when these two governments were negotiating for transfer of functions, Mr. Speaker, how are they planning to resource these functions? Because Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker, cannot exist in the office of the president, Mr. Speaker. How did they intend for these monies to be appropriated to this county through the office of the president, Mr. Speaker? The framework which would have been used to do this, Mr. Speaker, actually does not exist. Mr. Speaker, we would like to know, as the people of Nairobi, why is it that the monies that are being appropriated to Nairobi Metropolitan Services, why are they not being allocated to the Ministry of Devolution and ASAL, Mr. Speaker, where then they would have been channeled to the appropriate line ministries, because then we would have a line of reporting. We would be able to even oversight these monies as Parliament. But as it sits right now, we do not know where to follow these monies, Mr. Speaker. The same question applies for the revenues that Nairobi City County will raise this year. How will these revenues be oversighted? Because as it sits right now, NMS is not answerable to the City County Assembly of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are keen to know, how will Nairobi City County budget for these monies, Mr. Speaker? Because we do not know if these budgets are going to originate from the city, from City Hall, or whether they are going to originate from this house, Mr. Speaker. But overall, the big question of Nairobi Metropolitan Services, how it shall be financed, how it shall be operated, is a big question that the people of Nairobi are asking themselves, Mr. Speaker. So as we look at this and see over 3 billion Kenya shillings, almost 4 billion Kenya shillings going to Nairobi Metropolitan Services, we are concerned about how it shall be oversighted and how it shall be budgeted for, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this supplementary budget, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Alego Usonga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I rise to support the first supplementary estimates for this financial year as ably presented by the Chair of the Budget Committee. And Honorable Speaker, I would like to make the following observations as I support. One, that these supplementary estimates, and Honorable Speaker, we know that the economy has not been doing very well. And therefore, what these estimates mean is that the CS Treasury will be forced to go back to the public to borrow. And we are aware that one of the things that the pressure that we are going to face as a House is to see how to manage the fiscal deficit. Honorable Speaker, I fear that we are soon going to be asked to increase the fiscal deficit, contrary to promises that we have been given by the Treasury before. I think this House must be aware that continuous increases in budget estimates have a negative effect of increasing our fiscal deficit, and this is going to be a problem for the economy. Two, Honorable Speaker, a lot of allocations in this supplementary budget are aimed at bailing out struggling government entities. There are a number of government entities that are struggling, that are not able to sustain themselves. They are not able to raise their own revenues, and therefore they have to come back to the public, to Parliament to appropriate resources for them to survive. I think this is not going to be sustainable, and this House must ensure that those entities are either wound up or they are sold, so that they do not continue to stand on the government resources. Honorable Speaker, the third observation I want to make is the continuous abuse of Article 223, which the Treasury has continued to use to spend resources even to start serious infrastructural projects. Honorable Speaker, immediately this House passes the budget. That is the time when the government, the executive, begins to initiate even huge projects using Article 223. And I think this is really undermining the constitutionality of this House as a budget-making House, and ensure that development projects that are started using this 223 are avoided, and that we do not confirm those expenditures. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, there are some ministries that we continue to appropriate resources to, but they do not perform. An example is the Ministry of Energy under a parastatal known as REREC. Honorable Speaker, this parastatal is not performing because since I joined this House, Honorable Speaker, I was allocated 5 transformers in 2019-2020 financial year, and those transformers have not been done to date. Yet, even in this supplementary budget, we are allocating resources to that entity. I think this is unfair, and the relevant departmental committee in charge of supervising those parastatals should be able to ensure that they account and they perform. And if there are people appointed to serve in those boards, they should be either fired or dismissed, because we cannot put money where there is no value. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, we need to do what is called budget monitoring. This is something that I think this House is failing. Because how then do you have a situation where a financial year has ended and more than 13 billion of allocated resources have not been sent to those entities, or they were not spent. And the Minister for Treasury did not come back to the House to tell us that, look, this is the amount of money you gave us, we did not spend it, or we didn't have it. I think we are failing in budget monitoring as a House, and this is something that we must take very seriously, Speaker, under your leadership, and ensure that once we pass this budget, the resources are spent appropriately. Otherwise, thank you, Honourable Speaker. I support the supplementary estimate. Thank you.
Member for Kikuyu.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and rise to support and commend the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Honourable Speaker, for their report. And knowing, Honourable Speaker, the strenuous circumstances under which the Budget and Appropriations Committee has had to work, especially during these very difficult times, economic need to be brought to the beginning. The first supplementary budget that was tabled in this House had even the indication that there was an intention to reduce money from CDF. And I must take this opportunity to thank the Budget and Appropriations Committee for standing firm to ensure that CDF remains, as per our statutes and the CDF Act, at 2.5% of our revenues. And that we must commend the committee for maintaining that. Also notable, Speaker, is that now the arrears of 13 billion shillings have indeed been factored into this supplementary budget, and it is indeed important.
What's the point of order? Honorable Wachira.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm standing on standing order number 95. Reading from the mood, Honorable Speaker, looks like we have debated this particular motion. There is likely to be a repetition, and I wish to now call the mover to reply.
After I finish.
Very well. We'll check. Very well. Point noted. Honorable Ishongwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, I was saying, Honorable Speaker, with the 13 billion, we do expect that beginning next week, before the appropriations bill is done, this money will start flowing into our CDF accounts in the constituencies, Honorable Speaker. To Honorable Speaker, there are also pertinent issues relating to what we passed, and you remember last year when this pandemic came in. His Excellency the President, and you remember, Honorable Speaker, when the estimates were tabled last year for this year's this financial year, we indicated that the National Treasury had done this year's budget like any other normal budget. And indeed, they went back and they came up with a 53 billion shillings stimulus package. In that stimulus package, Honorable Speaker, were programs like the Kazim Tani program, Honorable Speaker. And it is shocking that, and you see from the observations of the committee, that the National Treasury has then gone back to renege on a policy to intervene on the Kazim Tani program to provide jobs for our youth in their localities, Honorable Speaker, and indeed reduce money from that program. And one is left wondering whether we were indeed, or whether the National Treasury was serious on an economic stimulus package. The same thing goes to the Weather Fund, Honorable Speaker, which again, I don't know what problem they have with members of parliament, because this fund is also domiciled in our constituencies. Reducing money from the Weather Fund loans, Honorable Speaker, means that young men and women in our constituencies who are looking up to borrow this money to be able to support their businesses will not have access to Weather Fund loans to be able to support their businesses during the pandemic. But more shockingly, Honorable Speaker, is that despite taking money away from the most vulnerable, we are also supporting state, what they are calling strategic investments of state corporations, Honorable Speaker. You will note in this supplementary budget a whopping 26.5 billion shillings from the National Treasury's account going to support KQ. Already, Honorable Speaker, I know 8 billion shillings of that amount had already been expended to support them during the COVID times. And I'm not saying we should not support our state corporations, but we must also ask ourselves, where do we put our money to? KQ has been supported by the state, I don't know for how many years, Honorable Speaker, and it's still going down. Honorable Speaker, it is not all countries that still maintain national carriers. Honorable Speaker, it is time we decided whether we want to maintain a name for the sake of maintaining a name, or whether it is indeed a strategic national investment, Honorable Speaker. At the same time, as you support KQ with 26.5 billion shillings, another 2 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, only 500 million shillings is going to support AFC. Yet we claim that the backbone of our economy is agriculture. And I'm fortunate the chair agriculture is seated in front of me.
but I heard him crying wolf that a lot of money has been taken from his department, Honorable Speaker. But I'm saying this because the government needs to decide where are our priorities, Honorable Speaker. Why should we be seeking to reduce money from CDF and giving money to Kenya Airways, Honorable Speaker, at this time? If you want to support people during this COVID times, put money in Kazi Mtaani, put money in Uwezo Fund.
Well, it did appear like there was the member from where rose and they claimed that that the mover be called upon to reply. Well, honor members, you are the owners of these processes. So let me just find out the mood, and I put the question that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as for that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as for that opinion say nay? No. Obviously, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Mover.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I want from the onset, want to thank all the members who have contributed, and also thank those who have not contributed, and I seek for their indulgence because most of the issues have been captured. Mr. Speaker, I want to give an undertaking that the issues that have been canvassed here, the issues that need follow-up, the issue, for example, of CDF, the arrears, we will make sure that the arrears are paid in this financial year. Mr. Speaker, I want to give this undertaking, honorable members, that all the issues that you have also raised about the pending bills is a concern to us, and Mr. Speaker, I want to give an undertaking to this House that we will do our best. Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply.
Before the question, I want to say that I have already done the head count, and I confirm that we have more than the requisite quorum. But honor members, particularly members who sit on the front benches, I want to encourage you at all times, follow the example of the leader of the majority party who always remembers to carry his card, so that when you are sitting in the front, don't be raising your hand and trying to jump and do some little jig on your seat. When you do jigs, I'm not able to see. It's not reflected on the machine here. Member for Kandara, you are not among those ones. I'm sorry, but I suspect you wanted to contribute to the other one, to the earlier one. No. Sure, I am neither addressing the member for Kandara, neither the member for Suba North, and neither the member for Tongaren, but I know the members would appreciate. Please just make sure that you have your card. Honour members, I put that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the first supplementary estimate for the financial year 2020/2021, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 18th March 2021, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 223 of the Constitution and Standing Order 243, 1. Approves an increment of the total recurrent expenditure for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 19 billion 125 million 524,385 in respect of the votes as contained in the attached schedule. 2. Approves an increment of the total capital expenditure for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 61 billion 579 million 711,818 in respect to the votes as contained in the attached schedule. 3. Approves an overall increment in the total budget for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 80 billion 705 million 236,203 in respect to the votes as contained in the schedule. And 4. Resolves that the attached schedule forms the basis for the introduction of the first Supplementary Appropriations Act 2020-2021, subject to the amendments as approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the National Aviation Management Bill, Bill number 18 of 2020, second reading.
Leader Majority.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I would wish to request, with the indulgence of the House, that I step down this bill until an appropriate time.
What? Honourable members, the leader of the majority party is the owner of the bill, and he is seeking to have it step down. That is in order, because if it's not stepped down, there will be nobody to move it. He is requesting that it be stepped down to another appropriate date. What do you mean? There's no debate on our members on this. There's nothing to ventilate on it. So honour members, having acceded to the request by the leader of the majority party to stand down the business appearing as order number 9, which was the only other business for consideration by the House this afternoon, there is no other business. Therefore, honourable members, time being 5 p.m. And there being no other business, the House stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021 at 2:30 p.m.